Mr. Chair, I move we go into open session.
Second.
All in favor of going
Aye.
into open session?
Thank you, Mr. Barrientos. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a presentation by Daryl Morin of Forward Latino about the impacts of Latinos in our community and immigration.
Now it's working. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief, and we will move this along as quickly as we can. But as you all probably know, today begins Hispanic Heritage Month. And I was always curious why it started mid-month and ended mid-month, and then learned when we did this a few years ago that that is because there are about 5 nations in Central America that got their independence during this time. So that's why this was began by, which president do you remember? And then Ronald Reagan made it a month, that's right. So I met Daryl about 10 years ago at Antigua in our community, and I've bumped into him there a few times since. And so I'm just gonna turn things over to him real quick. He's with an organization that calls themselves Forward Latino, and they are an advocacy group, and he'll maybe touch on that a little bit too, but in the sense of time, I'm gonna turn this over to him right away.
Thank you very much. Are you all comfortable if I remove my mask? Being social distance?
Yes, please do.
This might go a little bit better, yeah. Can you hear me okay? Is that fine?
Yes.
Forgive the dangling string here. So thank you, Mayor, for that kind introduction and the invitation to come and speak with all of you today. Typically we look at Hispanic Heritage Month as a time to really celebrate. But sadly, these last couple of years, it's turned into something a little bit different. So I really thought it was a really welcomed opportunity to come and speak before all of you here today. As the mayor mentioned, my name is Daryl Morin. I'm the president of an organization called Forward Latino, and it's a volunteer job. I actually am president and CEO of another organization called Advanced Wireless. We do the enterprise-wide wireless networks and handheld computers and barcode scanners for companies like Crate & Barrel and True Value, et cetera. So you'll find us in about 14 countries around the globe. So a little bit about Forward Latino, though. Our whole thing, we're a nonpartisan organization, right? We're a nonprofit, is about making sure everybody has the equal opportunity to realize the American dream. Not for something to be given, but just the equal opportunity, right, to achieve, which I think is one of our founding principles. So we do it through advocacy, civic engagement, et cetera. You'll find us in 29 states, as well as the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and all the way out to Hawaii as well. And we talk and work on anything with regards to civil rights or civic engagement, right? We're really big right now in getting people out to vote and registered. Workplace safety has become a huge issue, particularly in meatpacking plants and things like that, where we've seen a lot of folks really suffer and families be devastated. Veteran assistance, and so much more. As the mayor kindly pointed out, today's first day of Hispanic Heritage Month was something that was really started, as he mentioned, by Lyndon Johnson, and then Ronald Reagan actually made it a national priority by extending it to a month. And it's not so much about celebrating that I am Latino, et cetera. We're all proud Americans, but it's about remembering our heritage and celebrating that. So we don't believe anyone should have to give up their heritage or their pride and culture, with their citizenship. It's something that we can take pride in both. And you'll see here a list of all the countries that did realize their independence within a 1-week span. So that's why the state was chosen. you know, so much of the dialogue these days about Latinos really seems to surround itself in immigration, as if Latinos just suddenly appeared. But when you go back to the Revolutionary War, you'll find countless Hispanics that actually fought. During the Articles of Confederation, when nobody could really agree to who's going to pay the bills to arm and supply General Washington, right? It was actually the Spanish governor that came forward and said, we're going to give you the money, and we're going to give you all the ammunition and firearms you need till we can come out publicly and provide troops as well. So, you know, when you hear Hispanic, just to clarify this too, typically you're talking about an individual from a country that's predominant language is Spanish. When you hear Latino, it's somebody who's from a Latin American country. So you can be both, right? My culture goes back to Mexico, so it's from Latin America and predominantly Spanish, so I'm both. So just to clarify that. Well over 150,000 Latinos have served in the US military, over 61,000 from Puerto Rico. So many times people think Puerto Rico is a country in and of itself. No, they're citizens of the United States. They have the same obligations as every citizen of the United States when it comes to serve. And over 60 have received the Congressional Medal of Honor. This was a photo from last year. I was sent down by some members of Congress to go in a fact-finding mission to go with them to see, you know, what was really happening with the recovery efforts in Puerto Rico post-Maria. And what we saw was rather troubling. But the week before we'd gone down, an Air National Guard plane had gone down. All Puerto Rican, all 9 officers lost their lives. And that really drove home to me the dichotomy as to, you know, the dialogue and discussion that had been happening surrounding Puerto Rico. And here we saw some more American citizens who had just lost their lives. So just thought I'd share that with you. When you start to look at Wisconsin, Latinos now make up the largest minority demographic in the state. With regards to registered voters, I want to say we're up to about 185,000 going into this year's election. The MMAC, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, so many others have really said the key to the economic engine to being able to grow, and this was obviously pre-COVID, was being able to tap in to the Latino workforce, much younger than the average age of the Wisconsin worker, who's closer to retirement than not, and being able to make sure they have the education and the basic trade skills, et cetera, to be able to provide the needed labor. So I can get you a copy of both those reports as well. But really pointed out by all the major business groups that being able to harness this workforce was critical to the growth of Wisconsin. There was also another study that was done, and this was a big surprise to us. It shouldn't have been, though. Latinos, as a percent of people who are working in our economy, is off the charts at the very top. Ironically, though, or conversely, is they also lead with the highest poverty level. Typically, we equate working and employment and hard work, et cetera, to success. So that's where we, you know, both the MMAC and Greater Milwaukee Foundation and others are saying we really need to make sure that we're providing the education, the training, so that these folks can uplift themselves into higher paying jobs and move into the middle class, all in all. So interesting thing that we noticed there. So as I mentioned before, typically we look at this time as a time of celebration, but I've actually come here with an ask of all of you today. Over the last several years, we've really seen, actually, last number of years, we've seen a real uptick in the number of hate crimes against folks in our community. We've seen it follow some really divisive rhetoric. And while we agree there's a place for policy debates, et cetera, and any number of issues, including immigration, it's when we see people act on some of these extreme statements that are really quite troubling. So I received a call from this family, and I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is Mayud Villas. He's been a United States citizen for about 14 years. And a gentleman saw him here on the south side of Milwaukee, was going in to get dinner, asked him why he was invading our country, why he wasn't learning the language, told him to go back to where he belongs. He was a criminal. Called him some other things. and then pull out a bottle of battery acid and sprayed it on his face. That was something. Thankfully, he's in really good health. He was able to turn when he felt the burning sensation right away. He didn't panic and fall to the ground. He ran into the restaurant, began went to the bathroom, was pouring water on his face. Lost the first 2 layers of skin, but it's grown back now. Almost, you wouldn't almost know that he even had it. And thankfully, he only lost part of the vision in his left eye. But when you look at his clothes, the police gave them to us afterwards, after the investigation, ate through his jacket, his sweater, and his shirt, right? That's the kind of stuff that kind of makes it hard. I also came back a couple months ago from Des Moines. So as I mentioned, we have members throughout the country. A family there was having a really difficult time. Natalia Miranda is her name. She was walking to school to see a basketball game, and a young lady in a parked car at a red light saw her walking. And she admitted to saying, I saw she was Mexican, and I knew I had to take her out. So she literally accelerated from the red light, went up onto the grass. Natalia saw she was coming after her and started to run, and this lady was swerving until she successfully ran over her and then backed over her again. I can tell you we've had instances here where the swastika has now appeared around threats and acts of hate around Latino homes. That's the first time we've really seen that nationally occur. There was a rally. This was a couple years back down in Kansas City I was invited to speak at. It was an anti-immigrant rally. It's about all the people coming here and taking our jobs and leaving people, jobless, et cetera. And it was some predominantly white nationalist groups leading it. And when I looked up the date to see the day of the rally, there was historical significance. It was the night of Kristallnacht, which in the Jewish community is known as the unofficial start of the Holocaust. So we start to see a convergence, right, of all these forces coming together, which has been really concerning. We all know about El Paso, about the young man who admitted to going there to hunt Mexicans, et cetera. So anyways, a lot of divisive rhetoric. Before I started doing what I do nationally, I'm in DC about 6 to 8 times a year, consulting with Congress and others. Before I jump into anything, I always like to do my homework. So I said, I've heard so much rhetoric around this whole immigration issue. I want to know what's true and what isn't. And when I first started looking, I found a whole lot of really compelling websites that make it look like, hey, there's a bunch of freeloaders here bringing crime with them and taking advantage of the system, right? And these were quotes, taking advantage of our welfare system, do not contribute $1 to our economy. They rise the crime rates. They cost taxpayers billions. And just as I was getting ready to tell the organization no, I wasn't willing to help them with this, I stumbled across a congressional testimony statement by the chief advocate at the Internal Revenue Service. And in her testimony, she says, I have done what you said. I have implemented a system by which to tax the undocumented immigrants so they pay their fair share as you've demanded. And that didn't jive with anything I'd read or anything I'd seen on TV, quite honestly. So we did a little bit more research, and the one thing I learned from the whole exercise is make sure when you're looking for information to go to a place that's nonpartisan, where you know you're getting the facts and not filtered facts, right? So Congressional Budget Office, right, which serves both Republicans and Democrats alike, right, is often a good source. And the Pew Research Center is also notable. But things we found there is the incarceration rate for the foreign-born is dramatically less than individuals that are actually born here in the United States, significantly. That post-state and local taxes, there's a $10.6 billion plus in the ledgers by undocumented immigrants. Wisconsin, I want to say it was slightly under $100 million. Once you do the net of it all here. And I can provide you all these reports too. That was the Institute for Taxation, et cetera. 2.2 to 3.8 billion annually more is paid into Medicare than received annually. and $15 billion per year going to the Social Security Administration. And you have to remember, no dollars go out to undocumented. So they're pouring about $15 billion a year into Social Security, right, without any benefits going back to them. Also pay into unemployment insurance, not eligible for benefits, and a whole series of other things. But once again, this is just talking about immigrants, not Latinos in general. I then went to the IRS website, and I said, how can it be that an undocumented person can pay taxes? And this is right from their training slides. It's amazing. If you look at the slide on the left, in 1996, the IRS created the Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, ITIN. And one of the top primary listed reason is so that unauthorized immigrants can pay taxes. So right now, any one of you could call the IRS, and you could say, I know somebody who's undocumented, how should they pay their taxes? And they will walk you through that process. And depending on how long they've been in the country, and on average, they actually pay at a higher rate than US citizens. So we make sure we get that little bit extra from them as well. So, and I can make a copy of this presentation available to you. Another thing, I had somebody come and ask me to help them with getting the word out on the Selective Service, that they needed help with the undocumented population. And I was unaware of this at the time. By law, you have to sign up if you're undocumented. There's a whole section. Here's a copy of the website page right there that talks about the undocumented. By law, you have to sign up for the Selective Service when you're turning 18, or you risk permanent suspension from ever being able to petition for a green card or permanent residency or citizenship here, if you're even eligible. Everybody seems to think there's this line you can get in. There is no line. Only if your mother or father or you're petitioning for your son and there's somebody who's here lawfully are you able to petition. Anybody who's willing to work hard, et cetera, the misnomer is you think, well, wait your turn like everybody else did. There is no turn to wait. Even for those, if I was here and I had a son that was born in Mexico, before their application would even be considered right now is running between 13 and 15 years. Just to give you an idea as to how that process is working right now. So a lot of these things go into it. A lot of efforts have been made to pass immigration reform. Truth be told, it's been blocked by Republicans and Democrats at different times. Now, unfortunately, we hear a lot more rhetoric that is concerning from one party over the other. But truth be told, both parties have played a hand in why it hasn't passed in over the 20 years. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows the facts in Congress, trust me. This stuff wouldn't surprise them. They've written most of this stuff, right? But we hear the rhetoric that comes out anyways. DACA and the DREAM Act, kids who came here at a young age for no fault of their own, their presidents. The president finally said, the previous administration, we're gonna allow you to get a driver's license and to work lawfully and to go to college, et cetera. And that's been tied up in the courts where the current administration was trying to stop it. The courts have said, no, you haven't proven your case. Something like 75% of all DACA recipients have bought their first home, have bought a car. A little over 200,000 are working in healthcare, et cetera. So these are people that are participating. 95% are paying taxes, et cetera, and contributing to the economy. So just to share some information there. So anyways, I know you guys had some pressing business. I know I'm on a short time frame here. So one last thing. Surrounding this immigration debate, if you look Latino these days, depending on what you're wearing and where you go, you are thought to be undocumented. I have had family members be threatened and taunted. I've had mothers and fathers call me and say, my child continues to get beaten in school. So while I pointed out the slides about the acid attack, about the young lady who was run over by a car, I want you to know that this is happening every day in our communities here in Wisconsin. A lot of the times the families don't want to report it because they're afraid they'll be targeted for retaliation. Others don't want us to share it with the press because they don't want it to become a copycat item. Just like I tell you, we've been seeing the swastika. We haven't reported that to the media yet, right? Because we don't want to fuel things. But this is happening every day. Yes, there is a place for honest debate on policy based on facts. But given the temperature and the extremism of so much of the rhetoric we have today, my one ask of you is to help us drive down that, to make sure there is intelligent debate based on fact, to pull back on the extremism. Because, I know how I would feel if my son came home and was beaten severely for no other reason than the way he spelled his last name, or that his skin was just a little darker than somebody else's. And I can only imagine how it would feel if something more devastating had happened to them. So that's my ask of all of you here today. And on that cheery note, if any of you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take those and answer them for you if I can.
Are there any questions from the council?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you have a percentage throughout the farming industry, whether it's Wisconsin, throughout the country, how many, say, Hispanic heritage or background, they work in those farming at this time? Do you have any percentage?
A percentage of how many are serving in the armed forces right now?
Yes.
I used to know that. I can get that for you. Is it Mr. Vitale or Mr. Vitelli?
Vitale, yes.
Yeah, I will get that for you. I will also probably announce that my son just graduated high school, and he just enlisted in the United States Air Force as well, carrying on with the fine tradition. So, but I'll be sure to get you that
But I do
information.
appreciate your statements, or you see on the screen, that you show us. It makes a lot of sense, really.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's a lot of truth.
Yeah,
A lot of truth.
yeah. Thank you so much for that. Honest debate, right? Two sides discussing things is one of the reasons our country is great, right? Competition, et cetera. But it needs to be based on facts and good information. And it needs to be honest, earnest debate. And as long as we can keep that hate piece out of it, there's nothing that can stop us. So, any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for having me in this evening.
Thank you for your enlightening presentation.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
There might be somebody who can
Opposed?
take a picture if you handed it
We
to
are
them.
adjourned.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to call the September 15th meeting of the Common Council to order. Before we do a roll call, I just want to once again remind everybody to try to speak as clearly as possible into the microphone so that everybody can hear one another, and feel free to remove your mask when you're speaking if you think that helps project your voice a little better. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Here.
Stefanski.
Here.
Tenorio.
Here.
Vitale.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Grisham.
Here.
Haas.
Here.
Keen.
Here.
Lysick.
Here.
Ranky.
Here.
10 present.
We have a quorum. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led this evening by Alderman Rote.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move on to item D on our agendas. We have one public hearing this evening, which I'll ask the clerk to read.
Resolution for the vacation and discontinuance of a portion of public alleyway between South 71st and South 70th Street, north of West National Avenue, submitted by Max Miners of GG003 LLC.
Thank you. Mr. Scher?
Thank you, Mayor. This item involves the vacation of a 14-foot wide by 120-foot portion of alley. It's a segment that's located in a block north of National Avenue, east of 71st, west of 70th, and south of Orchard Street. You can see here the area, development area. There's a proposed development of an office development, which involves two parcels on either side of that said alley. The subject alley is highlighted here in yellow. The public notice area includes a total of 32 persons, property owners within that block, as described. We've received one verbal objection to date, as well as one letter of concern involving access, lacking access to 71st Street, and some safety concerns with respect to the other objection. So given the objection, it will require a 2/3 council vote in the affirmative to move this item forward. The proposed development site, taking a closer look at it, and some pictures of the site show that this shows the two development sites on either side of the alley. Both are zoned commercial C2. It will be a future site of an office development, a multi-tenant office, about 18,000 square feet in area. I have a picture of that coming up next. But the alleyway on the right, you can see the development site is pictured here on the bottom of the screen, looking at it from the west, looking back east. And then the two pictures of the alley to be vacated, looking east from 71st Street. Both the middle picture and the upper picture are looking east towards 70th. This is the proposed site plan. Site landscaping plan, as well as an architectural rendering of the future development. So this is the goal of the developer, to build a 2-story office building. The portion that would be vacated is highlighted here in red. It would leave a remaining alley, a north-south alley, which would go north-south between Orchard Street and the remaining east-west segment here that goes out to 70th Street. A right turn directional arrow would be installed at the end of the east segment of the alley to promote right turns rather than making a left turn. But the alley would also allow for ingress and egress either from 70th Street or from Orchard Street to the north. So residents on that block will still have access to their properties, to their garages, and so on. The proposed development, as it's shown here, is putting a significant landscaping buffer around the overall property. The new building is here on south, parking lot of about 45 stalls behind the building. But the developer is proposing to block off that alley to prevent commercial traffic from going out into the public alley and perhaps disrupting some of the neighborhood's peace and enjoyment of their properties. So all access to the commercial development will be via 71st Street, in and out between two new driveway cuts. The existing alleyway here, which is here, would be closed up and landscaped. So the Planning Commission has recommended approval at the July Planning Commission meeting. They forward their, we have received one objection and one concern to date. Again, the one objection results from a safety concern. There's a duplex on the east segment of that alley that would remain. Their side door exits out the south side of the premise, and they're concerned for people exiting the building and walking out into traffic within the alley. The other person who's concerned is not necessarily opposed to the alley vacation, but they would like to maintain access to 71st Street. So with that, we'll open it up for any questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Chair. Alderperson Grisham?
Steve, I have a few questions. As that resident directly behind that alley section, they have cars that are parked there as well. So access-wise, with vacating this, I think it's a great idea. I just have concerns with snow removal in the winter because as they have an approach, that's where they park two of their cars. This is the resident you're speaking of that said they have concerns with coming in and out. There's plenty of room between their house and the alleyway, but I think it's because they park their cars, which would be adjacent or if not on the alleyway.
Right.
So that would draw my concern, like I said, specifically in winter because they utilize that for parking. Secondly, the other objection didn't make much sense to me, if I can have some clarification on that, because Holy Assumption is not between 71st and 72nd. I wouldn't see that anyone is really using that as, you know, a thoroughfare for, in fact, it probably would be, it wouldn't make any sense to do so. So if I could have clarification as far as how those vehicles and access for those properties are going to be maintained for them. Will they still be able to park their cars? It would be on that beginning area where the east-west.
Yes. So here's, we'll just look at the overall block view aerial image. So this is the portion of alley that would remain. And then, you know, this property does still have, I mean, each of these properties have access to their garages from the alley. In this case here on the side yard, they do have a bit of a concrete approach here. So they would have access, you know, exiting from their home, maintaining, you know, safe, I guess proximity on their property. Certainly, if they were to run out the door and into the alley, I mean that would be somewhat of a risk. But you know, if they stay on their property, they won't be encroaching into the alleyway. But all of the access will be maintained for all of these properties in this area. The developer is proposing to close this portion off, which would then, you know, just focus all of the, you know, remaining existing traffic to this area here. Our Department of Public Works has indicated that they support the vacation. They haven't indicated any problems with, you know, closing off that west segment. So as far as snow plowing goes and, you know, maintenance, sanitation pickup, there hasn't been a concern that's been, you know, conveyed to me from DPW to that end.
Okay, my only concern, like I said, is that property right behind the salon there. And I know that with them parking the car there, should they be parking their car there is more where my direction was going with that. Because if plows do come through that area, we're putting ourselves in a situation, or they're putting themselves in a situation that, you know, that's going to be a tight spot if they're parking their cars there. They have a garage to park their vehicle in.
Right. I mean, if they are parking their cars there now, they should be on a paved surface. I mean, it does look like there's some pavement here. It's hard to tell what the rest of this is here, but
Okay.
yeah, if they can get out of the alleyway, I guess they could park there if it's on a paved surface.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions from the members of the council? Okay, seeing none, is there anybody in the audience with questions on this public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we will close our public hearing, and we will move on to item E, which is citizen participation. This is the opportunity for the council to receive information from members of the public. We limit this period to 30 minutes. Each speaker must announce their name and address to our council. We cannot take action on any topics
but we listen, and we ask that you keep your comments to no more than 5 minutes. Is there anybody who wishes to address the council under citizen participation this evening? You can use the podium and give us your name and address, and then please sign in, either before or after.
Good evening. I signed in the back, is that okay?
Yep.
My name is Jeff Hall, and I'm happy to see all of you tonight. Thanks for having this chance to speak with you. I'm a business investor. I've been investing in properties just to the east of West Allis in the Burnham, Miller Parkway area for the last 25 years. Done about 7 buildings. They've all been brownfield redevelopments. And I've invested about $40 million over the last 25 years. And it's created about 500 excellent jobs with companies like Aurora Healthcare, Concordia, Sherwin-Williams, DeWalt, Lennox, heating and air conditioning, 20 to 30 different great companies. Brownfields are my specialty. That's what I've been doing for my career. I have an excellent relationship with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources because I work with them constantly on these redevelopments and cleanups. So I know how to make it work. It's complicated. Most developers don't want to work on complicated sites because they take a lot of time and there's extra risk and more financial stuff to figure out. But I kind of enjoy it. It's a challenge, and I like taking things that are underutilized and really making them useful for the community. 3 years ago, my latest building was on 52nd and Burnham, just on the city line with the village of West Milwaukee, and that's a $10 million building. So I've been very interested in the property, the former Teledyne property at Burnham between 52nd and 53rd for the last 15 years, especially the last 10 and really intensely the last 4 to 5. Been working closely with some of your staff, and since I built that building right next door, I have a very strong vested interest in what happens at this property because it's right next to my other property. So I want to continue to improve the neighborhood, improve the economic vitality of that area. You may know the Wisconsin Motor Corporation, operated there for 80 to 90 years. A fantastic company, created a lot of jobs in the area, made a lot of great trucks, caused a lot of pollution doing normal operations for their time. Then they closed in 1985, and the building, as you may know, was demolished in 2012. It's been vacant land since then. There's been no economic activity really for 35 years since the Motor Corporation closed there. So it's a 9-acre property. That's a very large underutilized property in the city. It's overdue for investment, and it has legacy pollution. The liability is about $3.3 million to take care of all that cleanup and investigation and soil correction so you can rebuild something else. So I'm very interested in investing $12 to $15 million into the property, into West Allis, with a state-of-the-art industrial building. I have a fantastic, one of the leading companies in the country that's very interested in being there. It'd be a state-of-the-art building with fantastic jobs, 300 to 400 jobs. And you know, with this economy, jobs are really important. A lot of people have lost their jobs. It's a tough time for certain sectors of the economy. So this is a fantastic economic opportunity. Any funding would, for the $3.3 million of extraordinary environmental cost, whatever works best from the state is what we request, whether it's new markets or TIF. I'd be willing to do a developer-funded TIF where I'm funding the TIF with a bank loan. So that means no money from the city and therefore no risk from the city. I would fund it and agree to a minimum assessment on the property taxes so that it gets paid back, so that in the property taxes then from my tenant would actually be paying the property taxes to pay off that bank loan. Okay, so there's no city money involved in that scenario, which is, I think, tremendous. So right now there's no tax base, no contribution to the city. I would invest 12 to 15 million, so it'd be this increment that would pay for the cleanup for 10 to 12 years, and then all those taxes would come straight to the city and the county and the school district after that. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to expand the tax base, bring economic vitality to that neighborhood and that property, and fantastic jobs. Now, the building we would build would be a building that would be very productive for the next 100 years. The way we build buildings now, they're designed to be flexible, so they can change over time, whereas in the past, people kind of added on as they needed to, and they were all over. And once someone moved out, you had to really, like the old Teledyne property, it was a real maze, and you had to tear it down. The way we build buildings now, they really are a terrific investment for the long term. And I will own this property long term. I tend to hold properties. I haven't ever sold a property, actually. Some people build and develop and flip, which I think has more of a short-term mentality. I have a very long-term investment in the community and with the neighbors around my properties. So thank you for your time, and we're on the agenda for the Safety and Development Committee, so look forward to talking more and answering any questions if there are some.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hall.
Mayor Devine, I don't believe we got Mr. Hall's address.
Oh yeah, can you get an address, please, just for our official record?
Yeah, I'm representing my property next door, the Burnham Business Center at 5200 Burnham.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the council under citizen participation this evening?
Good evening. My name is Mike Farty. I live at 755 East Kilbourne Avenue in Milwaukee. Again, talking about the development at 53rd and Burnham Avenue. Just to talk a little bit about the area, I'm one of the principal owners of Colliers International, one of the largest commercial real estate companies in southeastern Wisconsin. I personally have done industrial real estate for 31 years. This area, I've worked with Jeff and on properties in this area for the last 23 years. And what I can tell you about this area is it's a good demand area. If you look at Burnham Avenue from 53rd over the Miller Parkway on the south side of Burnham, it's generally an industrial, industrial type users. The building right next door that we worked on and built and leased is a office and warehouse building. And the types of uses that we see are what we call flex use. You break down industrial into distribution, office, warehouse, flex, and this location we tend to see a higher level of industrial user, higher finish, higher technology, not as heavy of a trucking type operation. Will they have employees? Yes, there's employees, and a lot of that traffic goes to Miller Parkway. So that's Miller Parkway is a great artery to get up to 94. So that's generally where we see the traffic flow going east to Miller Parkway, north to 94. From the standpoint of the building and the valuation, I think we're being very conservative in the $12 to $15 million valuation. These buildings, if they're occupied by good credit national tenants, which generally we're focused on and we're securing those types of tenants, these buildings value out at least $12 to $15 million for this size development. So certainly something that I think will probably be the nicest thing in the area that has been built, and we're looking forward to working with the city. We've heard from Mr. Stiebel, we want a wow factor on this site and a lot of landscaping and a lot of glass and aesthetics, and it's something we plan to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the council under citizen participation this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will close citizen participation. We will move on to item F, which announces the standing committees which will be meeting during recess. Those room numbers are listed on the top of page 2 on your agendas. For the mayor's report this evening, moving on to item G, I just have a few quick things. Once again, I want to remind everybody that the 2020 census is underway, and I haven't gotten a recent update, but we were in the low 70% on participation last I had heard, but we're not at 100, so I know I need to keep mentioning this. I also want to mention that this Friday at the Farmers Market, we are going to have the third and I believe final grab-and-go food truck event on Friday evening, where you can pick up your dinner from several different food trucks and then take it to go. Over the past few weeks, we've also welcomed 2 small businesses into the community. I want to welcome and congratulate Camino, which opened up in our downtown on, I believe, the 7200 block of Greenfield Avenue. And I also want to welcome the Milwaukee MKE Co-work space, which had a ribbon cutting last week. Might have been this week. Days are kind of running together. Recently had a ribbon cutting. And they are on the 7300 block of Greenfield Avenue. And they are a rental, short-term, small business co-working space. So I want to mention those 2 openings and welcome them to our community. That concludes the mayor's report this evening. Moving on to item H, do we have any alderpersons' reports?
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Tenorio?
So this past weekend, the East Allis Neighborhood Association, we had a great cleanup neighborhood weeding at the Pollinator Garden on 63rd and Burnham. And we're gonna do our last cleanup of the year on October 10th in the same area. So that's a Saturday, October 10th at noon.
Where is that starting out, do you know?
It'll be starting at the Pollinator Garden again.
Okay, got it, thank you. I don't know if I missed that. All right, thank you. Any other alderpersons' reports?
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Weigel?
Just a quick reminder for all the aldermen, the skate park is temporarily closed, so I know you're probably thinking about going ahead and over there after tonight's meeting, but it's getting a 5-year refresh, some maintenance, and some upgrades to the park. It should be closed for about 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Weigel. Any other reports from the alderpersons?
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Lysick.
I move for approval of the minutes of the Common Council meeting of September 1st, 2020.
Second.
There is a motion with a second by Alderman Vitale. Were there any changes to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. We will move to items 3, 4, and 5. I'll ask for a motion to send those to the city attorney.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Haas, second by Alderperson Reinke. District 5, standing strong. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Under standing committee reports, we have the License and Health Committee, 1 item. Will that
Item
be done
6.
in committee? At recess?
Yeah, you want to report that now, right? We can do
You can do it during recess if you want.
Sure, we can do it at recess. That'll be
Okay.
fine.
Thank you.
Mayor Devine.
Alderman Lysick.
I move that we stand in recess until conclusion of the committee meetings.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in recess.
Still not on.
Mine, oh, mine just went on.
Nope, they're on now.
Mine's still staying on.
Make it Tracy's problem. All right, I'll call the Administration and Finance Committee to order. All 5 members are present. Item 9 is a joint refer, no, wait a minute.
7.
Item 7, thank you, Tom. Item 7 is a joint referral with Administration of Finance and Public Works. It's a resolution authorized Director of Public Works to sign a proposal for professional services and all other related documents for the hiring of Baxter and Woodman Consulting Engineers to meet the required mandate by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as it relates to completing a risk and resilience assessment for the city's water utility in the amount not to exceed $24,000. And you guys made me read all that.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Alderman Weigel and a second from Alderman Lysick. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 8 is a resolution authorize the Director of Public Works to amend an existing professional services contract with Baxter and Woodman Consulting Engineers to provide engineering and legal services for the Department of Public Works, Water Department, in the amount not to exceed $40,000.
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Alderman Weigel and a second from Alderman Tenorio. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And item 9, moving on to the Administration and Finance portion of the agenda. And also, I want to make mention as I go along here to Ms. Grill, thank you to you and your staff for the agenda packet that goes out with a PDF that we can follow along. That's what I'm doing also on my laptop. This is a great advancement and a great improvement. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So item 9 is a resolution relative to accepting the proposal of Central Square for furnishing Analytics Now software and the related setup training for an initial year hosting for a sum not to exceed $23,420.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Alderman Lysick and a second from Alderperson Keene. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And item 10 is a communication from the mayor and the Structural Deficit Work Group.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Grill.
the mayor stepped out, but I'll just mention that this is to get this information before the council. At the beginning of the year, the mayor put together this work group to work on the structural deficit that the city faces on a year-to-year basis. And so there were over 250 ideas that the committee went through, and what is presented to the council were the recommendations of the committee. I think it might be wise at some point during a regular Administration and Finance Committee that we would go through some of these if the committee wishes to do that.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Lysick.
I would recommend that the items be looked at and separated by committee, because I think some of these appropriately go before Public Works Committee, and some of them might go to some other committees. It's not all within the jurisdiction solely of Administration and Finance, so I would recommend that we separate those that should go to other committees as well.
Sure. That sounds good to me. Yeah, I don't know if we necessarily need to take a vote on that. I think that's just
No,
the
that's-
idea of the committee, yes. And Mayor Devine, did you have anything thank you for coming back up.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I stepped out and then I missed my window. So I guess, I'm assuming it's been covered, so if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, I think we want to hold this item for now.
Yeah.
And then we would want to have a standalone Administration and Finance Committee to address the Administration and Finance portions of, that are resulting from the Structural Deficit Work Group.
It's highly entertaining, light reading.
Highly
so.
entertaining.
Thank you.
Very good. So there's a consensus that we'll hold this item?
Yes.
All right,
Yep.
thank you. And then can I have a motion to place on file item 11?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Alderman Lysick and a second from Alderperson Keene. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And then can I have a, or is there anything else appropriately before administration and finance? That's where we are. Then can I have a motion to adjourn administration and finance?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Safety and Development Committee will come to order. All members are present. Item 16 on your agenda is an ordinance to authorize towing and impoundment of vehicles owned by habitual parking violators.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderperson Keene, seconded by Tenorio for approval. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 17 is a discussion item relative to proceeding with mapping of the M1 and M2 industrial zoning districts, notification of property owners, and schedule for implementation. Mr. Scheer?
Thank you, Alderman Lysick. This is a discussion item. Last year in November, the Common Council adopted an update to the manufacturing zoning district. And this was presented earlier in this year, but given some of the turnover and new council members, we thought we'd give a little refresher in our strategy towards implementing and mapping an M2 zoning district. So in the books right now, in section 1245 of the zoning ordinance, we do have a light industrial, an M1 district, and a M2 heavy zoning district with permitted and conditional uses listed in a table. There's use standards for various different types of outdoor storage, vehicle displays, heavy manufacturing, light manufacturing use standards that govern how a property is developed or used to protect surrounding property values. The M1 manufacturing district does allow a mix of different commercial uses as well. And then the heavier manufacturing district notably allows for heavier industrial, more intensive uses of the property, which could perhaps generate edge concerns or complaints from neighborhoods or residential neighborhoods where people live. So we've paid close attention to that in our conceptual mapping of the M2 districts to to keep them somewhat separated from residential areas. Being a fully built-out city, that's not always the easiest thing to do, but here it goes. We'll give you a little snapshot. So what's next? We have the text of the zoning ordinance created, M1 and M2, with the purpose statements, the definitions, and the permitted and special uses. So the next step is to map and label, where do we want to see the M2 heavy industrial zoning districts. The map you see here is basically all of the existing M1 zoning in the city, and it's existed that way since roughly about 1995. There have been some changes here and there throughout the city over that time, but this is all of the existing M1 zoning, about 1,100 acres, 389 properties throughout the city. And when I say properties, some of that does include 894, freeway, expressway areas, utility corridors, railroad corridors. So, but for the most part, about 389 properties. The areas that we're looking at converting to heavy industrial, which would be M2 designation, are located in basically 4 different areas. Primarily being in the first Aldermanic district, in the former Allis Chalmers area on the northeast side of the city, and then further south in the first district along the far east side of the city, and then just south of Allis Chalmers along a rail corridor here, this being the Unit Drop Forge property. I'll get into more detail of which properties are all involved in this in future slides here. And then the other area here in the far northwest corner of the city, Curtis Road and 116th, that area. If you think of uses within this area, Zignago, Poblaki, paving, and so on are some common businesses. Just a quick little snapshot of what M1 zoning is. So light industrial zoning is a low intensity, hopefully primarily non-nuisance generating. It's something that you could live near or perhaps even next to or adjacent to. There's also, within the zoning districts, there's use standards, again, to protect surrounding property values by adding landscaping, proper screening, hiding, outdoor storage areas. Trucking is a common event in most commercial and industrial districts, but trucking in general in a light manufacturing district is typically a little bit more of an accessory use. It's not a primary use. Heavy manufacturing, on the other hand, is a little bit more, definitely more intense, larger scale facilities, more trucking, freight, forge shops, concrete batch plants, waste management, the types of things you wouldn't necessarily want to locate next to if you were looking for a property, a residence to buy in the city. There's definitely the higher potential in these areas for noises, vibrations, odors that could be detrimental to property value. So we're taking a look at separating those a bit more from residential areas. So if we look at the first area in District 1, Alderperson District 1, the north end, historically the Allis-Chalmers area, just northeast of 70th and Greenfield, about 33 acres, 8 properties, 33 acres, properties such as Distribution Dynamics. There's a utility core for the old Allis-Chalmers, the pond. There's a number of sort of vacant, underutilized parking lots in this area. A parking structure. You have also a multi-tenant heavy industrial user here, the former Siemens property, Avalon Rail, and some other heavier industrial uses up in this area. AC Equipment Service is right here. Moving south, on the east end of the city at 54th, just south of Rogers Street, about 24 acres here. Four properties, including our waste transfer station, and then there's a number of, there's some office and warehousing, outdoor storage yards, multi-tenant flex industrial here, and then 7 acres, this being Unit Drop Forge in this area, a forge shop. These are the listings of properties, the 5 properties within that area, totaling about 31 acres. And then the far northwest corner of the city, the largest of the M2 districts being 71 acres as proposed here, 24 properties, Curtis Road and 116th, batch plants, concrete batch plants, rock crushing, outdoor storage, a lot of distribution, manufacturing uses within the area, primarily outdoor storage yards, along this area. So we've called that area out as a possible area for the heavier industrial uses. These are the listings of the 24 properties, about 71 acres. There's other considerations too. If you think about the different businesses within the city, different areas within the city where other heavy manufacturing could be located, we've thought of some other places. This is not everything by any means, but one area that came to mind was on about 116th and Rogers. You have the Ferguson distribution area, multi-tenant industrial here, some trucking terminals out in this area that we felt could be potentially advantageous to consider a M2 district there. Another area that one would think of would be maybe on 98th and Rogers. However, this we're not recommending it being so close and surrounded by residential. It may be one of those that you just leave zoned as light manufacturing for the time being. You could also consider even rezoning it to like a multifamily type of use to encourage the eventual change in use to apartments should the opportunity present itself. That whole area could be redeveloped someday. If the industrial were to go away and that opportunity were to present itself, we could take a look at that as a possible redevelopment area for some sort of, whether it be low-density residential or a mixed type of neighborhood with some varying levels of residential in that area. Another area for consideration that's currently zoned manufacturing, which we would recommend be rezoned to commercial C4, is the shopping center at Highway 100 in Cleveland. It's actually split zoned. There's a number of properties along the frontage of Highway 100 which are zoned C4, regional commercial. The Menards property, the self-storage property and everything from Kohl's department store to Kroger Pick and Save, all zone manufacturing. And this is something we feel is important to get out of that manufacturing zone and into a commercial zone. And other opportunities, the motor casting site at 65th and Greenfield Avenue, be taking a look at this as a potential opportunity. Motor castings is gone, and do you want it to remain manufacturing, or could it be something else? We think there is potential there for possibly a different type of use that we may be a little bit more compatible with the neighborhood. So these are the types of things we're looking at throughout the city to, that we just want to sort of broach that topic with you this evening. I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I'm happy to entertain any questions at this point. And then, as far as, can you still use your property? So if you have a property and it is rezoned, let's say we redesignate it to M2, you can still use your property, or even if you weren't, if perhaps you're already a heavy manufacturing property. Let's just say, for instance, if motor castings were there and we didn't redesignate motor castings property as heavy industrial, you could, if they were still in business, they could still use that property as they have for the past 100 years. The thing that would come into play is if they were out of business for a period of 12 or more months, they would have to fit a conforming zoning. Or if the use were to expand, if they wanted to buy another property next door and expand, they wouldn't be able to do that without having the appropriate zoning district. So the final slide here is just a pitch. We're seeking authorization to proceed. We'd like to reach out to property owners in the areas that we've designated, and proposed to you tonight as M2. Those 37 or so properties, we'd like to reach out to those affected property owners, as well as, perhaps even more persons within the general vicinity, just to have a public information meeting, broach the topic with them, see what types of concerns they have, and then, make some refinements or adjustments as needed, and then bring it before a planning commission and a common council public hearing later this year. If there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Mr. Scheer, would you be planning on doing all of the properties at one time, or do them piecemeal?
We could do them all at once. I mean, it's as council would direct us. I mean, we'd be happy to take them on in phases, or if you want us to do it all at once, we'd be happy to take that on.
I guess my only question would be, you had some questions on some of the properties as to should they be rezoned to lighter manufacturing, or should they be rezoned as something other, some commercial entities?
Right.
So
our first, correct, you're right. The initial push would be to get the properties that we're proposing to go to M2, to get those done first, and then everything else could fall in line. We'd come back to you with some other ideas of what we think should perhaps go from manufacturing to commercial. We could do that as a separate step.
So it would be somewhat piecemeal then?
Correct.
We'd be looking at one batch and then refine it at a later date?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from the members of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions. I would just tell Mr. Chair, go do it. Your proposal sounds good. This sounds like a good idea. Limiting the heavy manufacturing into a smaller M2 district sure makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
And you know what? I'll even give former Alderman May credit for it, because
Correct.
This was his baby, and so.
Yep.
Alderman May, if you're watching, he is sometimes. Give him credit.
Yes, he certainly deserves it, and just for the newer council members, prior to this ordinance being passed, all of the manufacturing was in the same manufacturing zone, and so you could have put a cement plant or a drop forge virtually anywhere that was zoned manufacturing. And this is an attempt to hone down and limit some of those areas, as Mr. Scheer indicated, that are adjacent to residential that maybe made sense 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, but don't make sense today. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to item 18. That's a resolution to consider a development agreement by and between GG003 LLC in the city of West Allis regarding the property located at 7030 West National and 15 Star South 71st Street. Mr. Steeble, Mr. Slash.
Is this the alley?
No, this is the development.
I see.
This is for the 7030 West National Avenue property?
Correct.
I think you see the renderings of it. It's a great facility, great building.
Yep.
This is the development agreement. Only one change in there, the Article 1, Section E, as a reference to a prohibition of any overhead power lines going through the property. And we've just found out from We Energies that to remove that one power pole in the middle is going to cost over 6 figures. So we're willing to drop that requirement. There is another pole on the site, on the western end of the site that has been topped off. Looks like it broke off. That will come down. So that would be the only change that we would recommend to this development agreement.
So then we would have to amend this resolution to, correct? Is that-
Right. If you would amend the motion to remove Article 1, Section 3, or Section E.
I'll make that amendment.
Section E.
And I second it.
It's been moved by Alderman Tenorio, seconded by Alderman Haas to amend per Mr. Steeble's sections that he stated. Any discussion on the amendment? All in
Was
favor?
Alderman
Pardon?
Weigel who made the motion, just as an FYI.
It was Alderman
Pardon?
Weigel that.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
doing,
I'm sorry.
I was doing my ventriloquism.
You know,
here.
it's
There we
very
go.
hard.
I'll make
very
that
hard when
amendment.
someone's wearing a mask to see who's. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And then on the motion, is there a motion for approval as amended?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Haas, seconded by Alderman Tenorio. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 19 on your agenda is a resolution to direct staff to draft a development agreement with Jeff Hall or a related entity for development of 52 Star West Burnham. And we're going to hold this until the rest of the committee members or council members are able to attend the meeting. So we'll recess until that, such time as they're finished with their meetings.
Do you need a motion on the recess?
Yeah, might as well.
Move we recess until the rest of the council is able to join us.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
All right.
Maybe I should start pretending it
Oh, that sounded a little personal there, Marty.
Oh, you found a bug. The KGB's been listening.
Yeah, probably.
I did not do this.
I gotta share my, I gotta share mine with you.
Okay, Safety and Development Committee will reconvene. Again, all members are present. Item 19 on the agenda is a resolution to direct staff to draft a development agreement with Jeff Hall or related entity for development at 52 Star West Burnham. Before we go into executive session, I think Mr. Hall would like to make a brief presentation to the committee. Mr. Hall, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Appreciate it. Let's see if that email came through. We can project up a couple things. I just want to share some additional details and address any questions. Mike has some renderings, some hard copies we can pass out, and then hopefully we can get the electronic versions.
I don't have a dozen of them, but.
Yeah, I got that.
We can pass them down, there's no problem.
I got it.
different than the email? No,
Oh, yeah, I got the email.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm good.
I'll look at it with her.
I haven't seen it.
One question was about,
Thank you.
I don't know what email this was in.
Thank you.
I got one already, thank you.
Oh, you got two here, sir. Oh.
No, they're different. There's 3 pages.
Oh, I didn't realize it.
I did write that down. We were told it's not large enough.
there's a question about my relationship with Amazon. Amazon is currently in 2 of my buildings, about 2 or 3 blocks to the east of the subject property. And they have 2 different businesses there, and they're currently expanding one in one of those buildings. And so we're talking to them almost weekly about various things. And they've expressed a very strong interest in this property. And we don't have final details on it because they need to know that there's a warm fuzzy from the city. And then if there is, then we would move very quickly, I think, into more details. They have 3 or 4 different business units that could use this type of facility. Oh, that's great, Steve, thank you. Do you want to start? Yeah, just go 1, 2, 3, 4 from the top, if you don't mind. This is just a simple summary. They have requested 100,000 square foot building and 300 parking spots. So that is a strong indication of employee level. There'd be 300 to 500 jobs, 13 to 14 million in tax base, as mentioned. They would really like to be in there next summer, which is possible if we all came together and said, okay, we got to get this done, like starting soon. The issue in terms of the timing is it takes a couple months to remediate the soil and the environmental pollution, and there's soil correction that's needed because the top 10 to 12 feet of the property have very poor quality soils. So we need to do what's called a geopier, sort of a piling that supports the building. And so that's about 2 months worth of work, and we could do it in October and November before the freeze comes, and then we could continue building through the winter. And if we miss that window, then we have to wait till the freeze and then thaw in the March and start in March. Obviously, everyone I think knows about Amazon. They're one of the biggest, fastest growing companies in the world, especially with COVID. It's been estimated that 70 to 80% of Americans are Amazon Prime members and shop on Amazon, so that means probably 70 to 80% of the citizens of West Allis. Their sales are about $300 billion. They employ 1 million people worldwide. They really, because they're usually moving very quickly, they like to prefer working with cities where they already are or with developers they've already worked with. So if they have a good experience in a city, they're likely to do more in that city often, if they can. As I mentioned, there are two of my buildings. Okay, is that it on that sheet? There's something down below. There we go. So the cleanup cost is much higher than the value of the land. So it's an upside-down site, right? So it's broken in terms of market terms, right? So that's a historical legacy from the operations there over the last 100 years by the motor company, and that's an extraordinary development cost that most development sites don't have. I'm happy to invest the market value of the land, but then the cleanup cost has to be a public funded, or these sites don't get redeveloped, as you know. So the costs are for environmental cleanup and investigation and cleanup, and then infrastructure, soil correction, and anyone developing on this site would have these same costs. It's nothing unique about the building that we're building. But I think the TIF generates quite a bit, like probably 6 to 7 million. So paying off 3.3 or 2.8, if we get a state grant, it would be reduced to 2.8. Should be pretty rapid. I would hope, certainly within 15 years, hopefully 10 to 12. Okay, I think next page maybe.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Alderman Haas?
yeah, just because it's appropriate right here. We had prior information from our staff that we were looking at 27 years, that the TIF might not even pay off. You're saying, Mr. Hall, based on your figures, that this TIF would be developer funded and pay off in about 10 years, correct?
Yeah, there's some variability depending on if we get the state grant of 500, that brings the TIF requirement down from 3.3 to 2.8, so that helps, right? And then the other variability is the exact value of the building, which could vary 12 to 15, I think is conservative in value. It's potentially, could be more. We have some buildings like this that Amazon's in there like 20 million. So I think that 10 to 15 is conservative, or 20 to 15. And from my projections, it's, 10 to 15 years, depending on those variables.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to question staff on that, because staff gave us information that the $3 million TIF would not even pay off in 27 years.
That analysis was based on the assessor's valuation that he put on the building. If they use the typical values, it would not TIF off at 3.3 million.
Our assessor doesn't assess this building. This is a.
He gave us.
This is an
That's
industrial.
where our analysis came from.
Okay.
Is that what would you guess the estate would assess it at? That's what we were trying to get a good handle on.
So our assessor estimated that the state would assess it at a certain amount, and that's what staff is basing the fact that it won't TIF in 3 million.
Based on that
TIF.
value is what we reported to you, if that was the case, that it would not TIF out.
Okay, thank you.
So John looked at like an average industrial building, and in the market we've seen that the Amazon makes a much bigger investment than your typical industrial user, so their values are sometimes 2, 3, or 4 times as much, and the rental rate will therefore be higher, and that's what generates the tax base. And we can easily remedy that, A, because if it's a developer-funded TIF, then the risk is with me, and B, we can have a minimum property assessment agreement to have property values step up so that we're assured that they pay back the TIF in a certain amount of time. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess I'd like to ask our city attorney, can we have an assessment agreement if our city doesn't do the assessing?
The agreement that Mr. Hall would make would be more likely to just simply cover the shortfall payment, not necessarily guarantee an assessed value. It'd be more like if the assessed value didn't meet a certain number, he would cover the shortfall.
And he would cover it, so it's not anything really we're not talking that he's guaranteeing an assessed value. He's going to pay us extra if it doesn't.
It's more guaranteeing cash flow equivalent to a certain tax value.
Okay, thank you.
And that's actually what I did with the city of Milwaukee, and it worked out really well and paid off much quicker than expected. This is very similar to the other seven buildings I've done in terms of the ratio of cleanup costs to the size of the site and the value created. And all 7 of the previous buildings we've done over the last 15, 20 years have been very, very successful TIF districts. So this is a rendering, shows my existing building on the left that's already there, and then the larger one in the foreground is the proposed building. And then the next picture shows just a close-up of the proposed Amazon building. So that's coming from the east towards the west down Burnham. And that is the entrance to West Allis, so we could do a welcome sign there if the city would like that. I think that'd be nice. And we have a really, this rendering doesn't show, but we would want really nice landscaping. This has some landscaping, but we want heavy landscaping and make it very pedestrian friendly. There's a park across the street, and very nice glass on the front of the building and trucks in the back. Next, let's see what else. Oh, that's just the extraordinary costs that add up to about the 3.3. You probably don't want to get into those details, but I understand them if you want to get into them. What are your questions? In my mind, it's, I'm not asking for anything out of the taxpayer till, so to speak. I would invest personally to create the increment that would then be paid back by the tenant, Amazon. So there's no money. There's no request from Amazon for public assistance, right? The public assistance is going to clean up the land, so the land can be developed like any other piece of land in the greater Milwaukee area. But Amazon, in fact, would be paying property taxes, which would pay back the TIF and would pay down the TIF note. So actually, Amazon's property taxes would be paying back the $3.3 million.
Mr. Hall, how many of the jobs are full-time and how many are part-time?
I'm sorry, I just don't know that now until we know exactly what the business is that's going to be there. And we would get into that pretty quickly in the coming weeks if we were to progress to the next step. As I said, Amazon's super busy, so once they get the warm fuzzy from the city, then they'd work it through and pick the business that's going to be there and have a lot of details. We get some Amazon people here representing the development. They've been adding a lot of jobs in the existing facilities that they have in town, and a lot of the jobs have been related to technology jobs, human resource jobs, safety and security, health kinds of jobs, as well as the typical fulfillment type jobs. So a really good broad variety of jobs. I'm sure there are some seasonal, like especially in the fall, September through January, but the facilities, the 2 that they have with me now are active and end up with a lot more jobs than they initially projected. So it's just, that's all I have for today. But they wouldn't require 300 parking spots if they weren't going to need them.
But it is basically going to be a fulfillment center, a distribution center, or is that not what it's going to be?
Well, they're different kinds. I mean, I don't understand actually all their businesses, but they have all different kinds of fulfillment distribution centers. Like in one of my buildings, they have packages that come in and they get delivered like within a couple days. And then the other business they have in one of my buildings has a lot of refrigerator and freezer space and a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's primarily grocery and stuff that people order if they're Amazon Prime members, and it's delivered within an hour. So they have these different kinds of fulfillment centers. And I just don't know the details today, I'm sorry, but we can get them. It'll just take...
Okay, so it is a fulfillment center, though.
I think it'd be some kind of
It's going to be some delivery out of the building, and
Yes,
there's going to be
some kind of fulfillment.
vans going in and out. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that clarification. It wasn't employees coming to work and sitting there, and it's going to be...
There will certainly be office space, and certain employees would come and sit there.
Right.
But it's not all office.
Okay.
There will be, I don't know, 10 to 20% office, maybe, something like that.
Okay.
Depending on the business.
You have 2 other buildings on site nearby.
I have,
Will those be used by Amazon as well?
I have 7 buildings that I own within 4 blocks.
Right, but the 2 buildings I was interested in, it's right across, probably.
I have one right next door,
Right,
yes, and then another one just a block down, and then 5 or 6 other ones like 2 blocks from there. And
Okay.
Amazon is not in the one right next door, but they're in 2 buildings like 3 blocks away currently. And they'll stay there because those are different businesses. This would be a new business coming here
I
with
see.
new jobs to the whole market.
so Amazon wouldn't be using those buildings, those 2 buildings?
The Amazon would stay in the buildings where they currently are,
Okay,
and then this would be another Amazon business coming in with
I see.
new jobs to the area.
thank you.
Any other questions from the members of the committee or the council?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
on that guaranteed minimum assessment equivalent, we'll call that, would that be a fixed dollar amount, or would that go up, say, with the cost of living over time? I guess that's my question, because
I
10,
think-
15, 22 years, whatever the time frame is, I mean, we've had relatively low interest rates and relatively low changes in cost of living lately, but that could change. And if we have a fixed dollar amount on that, I guess I'd like to see that tied to some sort of scale. And obviously, maybe there's a real estate price index it could be tied to or something.
I'm trying to remember how the Milwaukee one worked. There might have been like minimal kind of inflation adjustments over
Yeah,
time.
some sort of inflation adjustment, because if we get in a hyperinflationary economy,
Oh,
here,
yeah.
I'd hate to be tied to something where we're
Oh,
going,
sure.
really, that's all we're getting?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
the next council or 2
Yeah,
would be going,
yeah.
why'd this guy sign off on that?
Right, right. Well, we all want that thing to be paid off as soon as we can. And that starts with keeping the costs as low as possible, so we'll be really careful with that and negotiating with the DNR.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Hall before we go into executive session? If not, the committee may convene in closed session pursuant to the provisions of Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85, parent 1, parent E, for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties or the investing of public funds. The committee may reconvene in open session after the completion of the closed session to consider the balance of the agenda. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's been, you can't move. This is the committee.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Haas.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Tenorio. Alderman Tenorio.
Aye.
Alderman Weigel.
Aye.
Alderperson Keene.
aye.
Alderman Haas.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We are now going into executive session. Okay, Safety and Development Committee is now back in open session for action on item 19 on our agenda. This is a resolution to direct staff to draft a development agreement with Jeff Hall or a related entity for development of 52 Star West Burnham Street. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Alderman Weigel. Move to deny. A motion by Alderman Weigel to deny. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Alderman Haas. Any discussion? You want a roll call on this? Yeah, let's do a roll call. Alderman Tenario.
Aye.
Alderman Weigel.
Aye.
Alderman Keene.
No.
Alderman Haas.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So the motion passes. The resolution is not approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Good evening. We will call the Common Council back to order, and I will ask our clerk to call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Here.
Stefanski.
Here.
Tenorio.
Here.
Vitale.
Aye. Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Grisham.
Here.
Haas.
Here.
Keen. Lysick.
Here.
Reinke.
Here.
10 present.
We have a quorum. We will begin with the Administration and Finance Committee, chaired by Alderman Haas. I will ask the clerk to read out that report.
The Administration and Finance Committee recommended adoption of items 7 through 9 and recommended placing on file item number 11.
Mayor Devine, I move for approval of the committee report.
Thank you, Alderman Haas. Is there any discussion on the Administration and Finance Committee report? Hearing none, I will ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Aye.
Stefanski.
Aye.
Tenorio.
Aye.
Vitale.
Aye.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Keen. Lysick.
Aye.
Reinke.
Aye.
10 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have the Public Works Committee, chaired by Alderman Rote. And
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
The Public Works Committee recommended adoption of items 7, 8, and 15, and placing on file items 13 and 14.
Move for approval in accordance with the committee report.
Thank you, Alderman Rote. Any discussion on the Public Works Committee? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Aye.
Stefanski. Tenorio.
Aye.
Vitale.
Aye.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Keen. Lysick.
Aye.
Reinke.
Aye.
10 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next up, we will have the Safety and Development Committee, chaired by Alderman Lysick. I'll ask the clerk to read that one.
The Safety and Development Committee recommended passage of item number 16 and then adoption as amended of item number 18 and then denial on a 4-to-1 vote of item 19.
Yeah, we'll hold that one
Yes, that will
separately.
be separate action.
Mr. Chair,
Uh,
if I could just, for number 19, it would be a motion to receive and place on file, just as a technicality, as opposed to deny. I think that'd be a proper way of interpreting the motion.
Okay. Noted. So we will take up,
I would move for approval of committee report on items 16 and 18.
thank you. That's what I was stumbling through trying to say. Any discussion on that motion? If there's no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Aye.
Stefanski.
Aye.
Tenorio.
Aye.
Vitale.
Aye.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Keen. Aye. Lysick.
Aye.
Reinke.
Aye.
10 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you. And then on item 19.
Item 19, I would move that the resolution be placed on file in accordance with the committee report.
Thank you. Any discussion on item 19? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Aye.
Stefanski.
Aye.
Tenorio.
Aye.
Vitale.
No.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Keen.
I'm sorry, are we voting on it to be placed on file?
Placed on file.
Okay, aye.
Lysick.
Aye.
Reinke.
Aye.
9 in favor, 1 opposed.
Motion carries. Okay, next up is the License and Health Committee chaired by Alderman Vitale.
Yes, Alderman
Is,
Ryan,
I'll ask the clerk to read out that report.
we got 6, 20, and
Oh.
21.
Alderman Vitale, our clerk will read this one out.
I know I will, she's helpful.
Thank you.
He's trying to give you a break.
The License and Health Committee recommends the following. Item 6 will be placed on file, and then granting of items 20 through 22.
Thank you.
She'll move for approval based on the committee report.
Thank you, Alderman Vitale. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. And next up, chaired by Alderperson Reinke, the Advisory Committee.
The Advisory Committee recommends approval of items 25 through 30.
Mayor Devine, I move approval of the committee report.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the committee report, items 25 through 30? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderperson Rote.
Aye.
Stefanski.
Aye.
Tenorio.
Aye.
Vitale.
Aye.
Weigel.
Aye.
Grisham.
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Keen.
Aye.
Lysick.
Aye.
Reinke.
Aye.
10 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries.
Mayor Devine,
Alderman Lysick,
I move that we adjourn until our next regularly scheduled meeting, Tuesday, October 6th at 7 p.m.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.